you believe in God?
I believe in myself.
What does that mean?
I have confidence in myself.
And I've been doing some soul searching lately, been asking myself some pretty tough questions. You know what I found out? I have no interest in myself. I start thinking about myself, I get bored out of my mind.
Well, what does interest you?
Courage. Courage interests me.
Love that scene. Some early Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan there. Joe versus the volcano. You believe in God? I believe in me. There's the world, right? There's our battle right there. And courage? Yeah. Thank you for your courage, the hundreds of you who have shared your stories here at Touched by Heaven. It does take courage to share your stories, your encounters with angels or divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences. And we thank you so much for coming here where it is safe. It's safe here to share your story. And yes, we still need your stories. Please, you keep this all going here at Touched by Heaven. Come to touchedbyheaven.net and share that story. Thank you so much. Everything that we read about in the Bible is still happening. And so we're going to talk today about such things here on Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. And a quick birthday shout out today here as we post on September 8th to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Yeah, by tradition, this is her birthday, September 8th. Anyway, her birthday today. So she's somewhere around 2,038 years old and doesn't look a day over 1,873. Don't you think? She looks great. So happy birthday, Mary. I have a special sensitivity and love for Mary and devotion because she's the one who brought me back. After decades away from God, Jesus, and all, she's the one who came and got me. And all the signs point to that. And I'm not going to go through all those things again, but I do want to tell some stories or recap some stories, especially early on when we began Touched by Heaven back in 2018. There was a lot of Mary wrapped around it. I was doing some talks with Mary wrapped around it, so I want to kind of revisit some of those things, some of the stories early on, because I think they capture in a special way the conversational nature that Mary had in those early episodes, and I want to return to of just how important she is. And what's interesting, and I don't think this was an accident, this was Touched by Heaven also. This week, I don't even know where it came from or how I don't know. But I started reading some things Martin Luther said. Martin Luther, of course, led the Reformation back in the 1500s. Martin Luther loved Mary, had a huge devotion toward her. And he certainly was no fan of the rosary. He didn't care for intercessory prayer and praying to saints and all that. However, he was a believer and preacher, and there are records of his sermons of how he believed in Mary's Immaculate Conception, that he believed in Mary's perpetual virginity, that Jesus had no brothers and sisters, and all of that. But then early on, Calvin said the same thing. Zwingli said the same thing. They were all in the same boat. They went with the tradition of the Catholic Church at that time. Then as things broke up into 40,000 pieces here, all the different denominations, it's just gotten kind of lost in the history of all this. Martin Luther believed in the assumption of Mary, body and soul, into heaven. He just didn't think we should be making a big deal out of it, basically, because, again, focus on Jesus, right? So there are just these things that I came across, and I'll put the information in the show notes if you want to see what my source is. But I just want everyone to kind of start an equal footing here, because once upon a time, all of this was the belief. We all agreed to the same stuff. There was that day Beth and I went into Mass, and it was daily Mass. Not a lot of people in there, so, and that was the day. And I wasn't sure how we were doing. I think we had done 2 or 3 episodes. I just wasn't sure how Touched by Heaven was going, and that was kind of my prayer. And we went into Mass, and my phone is on silence and mute and all those things, right? And yet, somewhere during the course of the Mass, I remember we were all standing. I'm not sure what part of the Mass it was, but I suddenly hear from my right front pant pocket a little voice, a man's voice, saying, "We are attempting to find someone who can help you. Please stand by." What? And Beth's looking at me. I'm fumbling for the phone, and what is it? "We are still attempting to find somebody who can help you. Please stand by." And I go, "What? I don't know." I'm fumbling for buttons again in my pocket, going, "I don't know." She's like, "Yeah." And then finally, a woman's voice saying, "Hello, may I help you?" Again, I'm in. What? So at the end of Mass, I'm opening. I'm grabbing my phone going, what the heck was going on here? And Elizabeth's going, what was that? And I going, I don't, and I realize it's an app that is opened up by itself, seemingly. It's called Be My Eyes. And I use it if no one's around to help me, determine whether that's a blue shirt or a gray shirt or what that is. As the blind guy, I just hit this app, and it calls somebody in the world who says, that's blue, whatever it is. So it's Be My Eyes. And as I'm looking at Beth to my left, I could see better back then, and I could kind of make out a statue literally in that same sight line, the statue of Mary over there. And it just kind of hit me. Oh, you want to be my eyes. I want her intercession. She goes to Jesus with my prayers, And I thought, oh, that, woman's voice again. It is significant that it was a woman's voice saying, may I help you? And I'm going, okay. And ever since then, I've just always prayed to Mary to whatever we do here on the podcast, that it be pleasing to Mary, because if it is, I know it's going to be pleasing to Jesus and to the Father and to the Holy Spirit and all that, right? That's Mom. Mom takes care of us around here. So let's see, where do we start? I'll play some stories and tell some stories here, okay? And I found this wonderful little story here from Megan. Megan, we took her out to lunch. She lives here locally, and we took her out to lunch, and we knew she had a story. At the time, there were some relationship questions, and she felt that in prayer that she had received an answer.
I had actually asked Mary for a sign. I got it. Mm-hmm. But I just was so tired that I just said to her, and this was just in May, this past May. I said, that was a beautiful sign. I can't believe it. I'm kind of like, wowed. And I said, I feel so selfish to just say, hey, can you just one more time to just make sure? I said, you're associated with roses. I said, can you just give me a rose in an unusual way tomorrow, just so I know. I said, again, I know it was you, but just, that one little thing to top it off. I kind of forgot I said that. It was one of those casual things again. And the next day at school, my students were working on their history final projects. And I had a student who came in and early in the morning, and she said, hey, can I put my project in here? I finished it early. I said, you finished it a week early. And she's like, yeah, can I just sit it in here? And then by the end of the day, I have her for the last class, she said, hey, did you get a chance to look at my project? And I said, no, I didn't. Now, see, their projects were it was like this kind of museum box. You would have to open the box to see all these different things she put in it. So I sat her down next to me. I said, all right. I said, and now this was about the civil rights movement, okay? So it's a history project. And we opened the box, and there's a beautiful rose across the top. And at first I didn't even think, oddly, it just didn't register with me. And I was looking at all the history stuff, and the thing I thought was, why does she have this rose in here? It has nothing to do with anything with history. And so she kept looking at me, and I was like, oh, this project's great, blah, blah. And she's like, don't you want to know something? And I said, what? And she goes, don't you want to know why I put that rose in there? I said, oh, actually, yeah. And she's like, well, the answer is I don't know. She goes, last night, I just found this rose, and she's like, I just really wanted to put it in here. And she's like, I really have no reason, but I really wanted to. And then I still didn't realize that was my prayer last night. And I shut the box, and when I shut it, though, a little crucifix was hanging. And so that got my attention. And I opened it back up. When I opened it back up, then the rose totally stood out to me. And what I had noticed, but I didn't notice the first time, was there was a cross necklace wrapped around it. Yeah.
And she doesn't know why she did that?
No. So I told her, I said, do you know, and I know this is public school, I don't get into too much detail, but I said, do you know what the rose means? Because I said it and she said no. And being that she had a cross necklace in there, I thought, okay, she must have a little bit of faith. I said, just so you know, that a rose does mean Mary. And she's like, oh my gosh. So, and we didn't go farther than that, but the fact that I didn't even at first register with me, but when that necklace came out and I opened it back up and it was tied around that rose, I can't even explain the feeling I had. Because that's just, and that this girl did this project a week early. She purposely was pointing out to me, I don't even know why I put this in there. And then the fact that it was even with that cross, it just kind of really, it was a beautiful thing for me.
Did you cry?
Later. I was in class.
I mean, you have to. I mean, just something like that, so profound, where she says, I don't know why I did this. She's wrapping a cross around a rose. And, I mean, my Lord.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! I mean, when that hits you, that just has to hit you between the eyes.
And then sometimes I wonder too. I was like, I wonder why she used her too. So I made sure I prayed for her.
Well, and tell me about that. Tell me about that girl. How connected do you think she is?
Honestly, I don't know, because we don't have those, conversations
In a public school.
Right.
Yeah,
We don't.
yeah.
So I mean, she looked excited when I said that, but I don't really know.
So I guess you got your sign.
Yeah. But I've been feeling a lot lately, like, I don't know, I've been hearing some in your podcast and just other places I'm going, that it's like, you have to share this, like, to help other people. Like, I want other people to know, like, God wants a relationship with you, so he will talk to you. I used to not believe that he will, but the most communication I have gotten is since I started saying the rosary, which took me a while to say. I was reluctant to say. I thought it took too long. I thought it sounded boring. I had every reason in the book to not do it, because my aunt used to get me to say it. But then I went through where I kept finding this Mary chain and pictures over and over when I was contemplating it, and I finally just did it, and I was like, I'm only going to do it for 1 month, and I'm not going to do it again. It was very odd how reluctant I was, and it was actually kind of, to say the whole thing, like, now is comforting to me, but it took some I don't want to say practice is the right word, but I was like losing my patience, like it was taking long. But once I did it and I started to see how much change in my life, and I feel like I got closer to God. So if you want to get closer to God, say the rosary, because you learn about him through it. Mm-hmm. It's not just a bunch of Hail Marys, because you have to reflect on the mysteries. And it just starts making you think about your life different. And I did start getting so many different, as I call, God winks. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely delightful, Megan. Anything else?
I would again just want to say the rosary. It'll change your life. And you know what? It'll change your family's life, because it's going to change everybody around you. It'll be protection for everybody you love.
Ted Bundy, the serial killer, he was on death row, and he was talking to a priest, a Monsignor, and he was recounting something that happened at a Florida sorority house where he was on a killing spree, going room to room. But he got to one room, opened up the door, young woman lying in bed, and he wanted to kill her. And he said, I couldn't kill her. He was trying to explain this force he felt, this mysterious force. And he said, I dropped my weapon and I ran. What was that? What was that about? That young woman told the same priest earlier about her side of it, how she was laying there holding a rosary. It was the rosary she prayed on every night, because she promised her mom before going off to college that every night before she went to bed, she would pray a rosary for protection. Really? Does the rosary have that kind of power? Those beads, those Our Fathers, Glory Bees, and Hail Marys, do they have that kind of power? That kind of protection over evil? Just pure evil. Absolutely pure evil. And it just brings to mind again that it doesn't matter whether you're Catholic or Lutheran or Baptist or Karen Shapiro.
Growing up Jewish, I always felt like I was being a traitor to God if I went into another church. I don't know. Nobody told me that. I just felt that. And my family all perished in the Holocaust. My grandparents, all their family perished. So I don't want to disrespect them, but I also want to open my heart to everything. I don't want to be judgy. I don't want to be labely. I just want to be, and I want to do the right thing. I don't really feel like I'm going to label myself as Jewish or Christian or whatever. I'm just going to be I'm just religious. I'm just spiritual. I just believe in God, and I carry that rosary with me all the time. And I don't know all the poems. I don't know all the prayers by heart yet. So I have a little booklet that I read, and then I take it with me. And I can tell you all the Hebrew prayers, but I have a terrible time remembering that.
Okay. I think you're amazing. I mean, there has not been a time probably since her appearance at Lourdes to St. Bernadette in 1858. I don't think there's been a time where she didn't show up, like at Fatima, Garbandal, Akita, and she always says the same thing: pray the rosary every day. It's your greatest spiritual weapon, and it is. It changes. If you think you're under attack for anything, you start praying that, you will notice a huge diminish in the attacks.
I do. I feel it. I feel the difference when I when I don't, or if I get too busy and I don't stay in the habit of doing it, I absolutely feel different.
Was that, wait, a huge diminish? Is that a sentence?
I don't know. You said it. Did I
diminishing.
say it?
No, I said
I'm telling you, I am so sleep deprived. I have no idea what I'm saying half the time.
Excellent. That's the way I want you. In the spirit. That way you're in the spirit the entire time. That's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. I believe you're the first Jewish person to tell me that she's praying the rosary. So that's pretty good.
I tell you what, this is really crazy. I have a friend who's Catholic as well. She's one of those very anxious people that can't stop worrying, and she'll just find things to worry about. And I told her, I said, "Are you Catholic? You're Catholic, right?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Do you have a rosary?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Why don't you pull it out and calm your mind and just pray on it? And then you don't have to be anxious about anything because you're covered." And she looked at me and she goes, "Honestly, it took a Jewish girl to tell me to pray the rosary." So that's what we joke about that. She goes, "It had to take a Jewish girl to bring me back to the church."
Let's pause right about here. Then more Mary here on Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Quick Patreon shout out. Thanks, Lisa Masterson, now in the family, Patreon family. Thank you so much. She has became a listener, actually shared a story a little while back, joined the family, supports what we do because
it's powerful, it's real, and with all the escalation and tension in the country, having your faith is more powerful than anything these days. But I'm grateful. I'm just grateful for so many things, and I'm grateful for people like you. You've changed a lot of people's lives, and you should be really proud of yourself.
I don't have an answer for that. You're touching me very deeply, but this is so Holy Spirit driven. And you, before we even, I just noticed you went on Patreon and joined the family. So thank you for that, because that helps us do.
If you're going to spend money, I'd rather put my money toward the good and, spreading the word of God and spreading kindness and spreading these miracles. Like you always say, Trapper, you say the "and now," when you talk about the "and now" and all these miracles and everything's happening every day. And so if this, supporting your organization could bring more joy and bring more people closer to God, I think that's money well spent.
Thanks, Lisa. We so appreciate your help. And actually, Patreon's one of those things we went to Mary about as well. Do we? And in prayer, we got a yep. And that was the actual quote, yep. She usually is known for saying yes, but yep. You can come here to this episode of touchedbyheaven.net or go to patreon.com and search for Trapper Jack. All right, let's get back to our special Mary Day here at Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Here on Mary's Day, we take a look at the title of this episode again about miracles and messages, flare gun moments. The miracles get your attention, then what? Then it's about the message. What did Jesus say? What did the apostles say? What is Mary saying in these apparitions? There's a message. God is giving a message to his people, right? He gave one to me almost exactly 5 years ago. I had this dream, and the bottom line of the dream was, if you're going to go out there talking about the church, about Mary, about Bible, about whatever, strip away the ignorance. He did that through a dream in which I saw a catcher not wearing his catcher's gear. And God knows what I know, and he knows that I know that catcher's gear, well, it's called the tools of ignorance. It's like you're smart enough to be playing baseball, dumb enough to be the catcher getting all beat up back there with the mask and the shin guards and the chest protector and all that. So those are your tools of ignorance. But in the dream, catcher didn't have that. And I knew that meant in a nice way, God was saying, strip away the ignorance, go deeper, learn more. And so that's what we do. And that's what we are about to learn here in this conversation with John, brand new priest, just ordained last year. He's now in Phoenix. He had no plans to be a priest. He had no plans to be a Catholic. He's growing up Methodist. Everything's fine, hunky and dory, both hunky and dory.
I did a semester abroad my sophomore year in Mexico, and I became very interested in Our Lady of Guadalupe, and then that triggered a whole interest in research into Marian apparitions that continues to this day.
To me, Our Lady of Guadalupe says everything. The science just is like, would some atheist please explain the science of what's going on that image?
Oh, I know. The number of miracles with that image, everything from the colors to the fabric to the meaning we talk in the church about how to evangelize effectively. That was a custom evangelization tool from heaven to transition the Aztecs from sacrificing humans to their gods to transitioning into Jesus Christ.
It's incredible. And as you said, all the sacrifices, they were sacrificing, I saw an average about 250,000 people a year, to keep the sun burning, to keep the sun god, doing his thing, which is why they were really killing people in December. Oh, no, it's going away. It's getting colder. We better throw more bodies onto the fire here.
And they sacrificed to the rain god and a couple of others for the same reason, to keep the land fertile, and that was their view of it. And through our Lady Guadalupe, that evangelized them and that helped them understand Jesus as the eternal sacrifice. And once they understood that, the sense of relief, we don't have to kill each other anymore. He's the eternal sacrifice, and they embraced that.
And the image did all the talking. The science, well, they didn't even have the science back then. It was just all the symbolism that did it back then. But that could be used today.
Yeah, I think it could be used better. I made my first pilgrimage to Guadalupe, and what struck me most powerfully about that visit was reflecting on the message, what she said to Juan Diego, or at least part of what she said to Juan Diego, where she talked about her desire to introduce Jesus to the masses, and she refers to Jesus as he who is all my love, he who is my compassionate gaze, he who is my help, he who is my salvation. So especially a lot of Protestants, they need to read the message of Guadalupe. They need to read what she said to Juan Diego, because it is a Christocentric message. She wanted to introduce Christ to the masses, and that's exactly what she did. And what struck me on my pilgrimage when I last went there was the fact that I was watching all the masses back to back to back. I was watching all the confessions, and I thought, her desire has been realized, because nowhere in no other Catholic shrine in the world will you find the frequency of masses and confessions that you'll find at Guadalupe. And what is that? That's Jesus giving himself to people, forgiving them, and giving himself to the Eucharist. Very powerful.
Which part of the science, and I guess the thing that just blows me away is in the eyes, on whether it's the cornea or the retina, whatever you want to call it, where microscopically, after 400 years, they could finally see the images of Juan Diego and the bishop and the cloak and the roses, 12 other people in the room. It's in both eyes. They can see it microscopically.
It is really interesting that the refractions, the images they found in the eyes. But I would say, though, that the single most compelling thing to me, it's two things about the fabric. It's the fact that it's maintained its integrity for so long, because, as I'm sure you know, those cloaks were for the peasants to protect against the elements. They were made of coarse cactus fibers, and those cloaks would fall apart within 20 years max. And here you have this thing. It has continued on for hundreds of years. So that aspect of it has always amazed me. But probably the number one thing that's amazed me, Trapper Jack, about that image is the resiliency of the colors. Because we have to remember that for at least the first couple hundred years, that image was not behind glass. It was exposed to the elements. It was exposed to salty air, humidity, and above all, black smoke from candles, where it would have darkened that image. But that didn't happen. Some of the symbolism of the image I found very striking, such as, for example, the angel at the bottom. So what's very unique about that angel is that angel has eagle wings. And it's really interesting because in Aztec culture, they revered the eagles more than all the other animals, because if you think about it, their highest god was the sun god, and the eagle was the animal that got closest to the sun god up in the sky. And so, roughly speaking, eagles to them were sort of the equivalent of angels. The eagle wings on that angel, it basically helped them make a transition from the eagle to the Christian understanding of angels. And I find it fascinating. After I learned that, I took a new appreciation in a way for Eucharistic prayer, one of the Mass, where we pray that the holy angel will take the sacrifice to God to his altar in heaven. I mean, there were just all these connections that I was thinking that it helped, how that image helped paved the way for those people to transition not only to veneration of Our Lady bearing the Son of God, but even to angels themselves. Really fascinating. From my study of Marian apparitions in seminary, I become more convinced than ever that, she is the messenger of our times, really kind of a prophet of these times, constantly calling us back to God and working miracles like this to get our attention, but to pay attention to a message. One thing I say in my talks on Marian apparitions, I said, we can never forget that the purpose of the miracle, God is trying to flag our attention to listen to something that he wants to tell us. We need to link Guadalupe to a more general teaching of God cares about us, he knows what's going on in the world, and he continues to want us to convert. And then we also need to use apparitions like Guadalupe and talk about the miracles, but say this is God's way of trying to get us our attention because we're not living the right way and we need to change. We need to convert. I see that dynamic in every single Marian apparition. And having studied a lot of them, it really blows me away, the totality of God reaching out to try to get our attention to get us to change.
Isn't it interesting that the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe is the image of Our Lady of Revelation in chapter 12
Absolutely.
of Revelation? It's the same woman. It's the same woman.
Clothed with the sun.
Standing atop the moon, pregnant, ready to give birth to a male
right.
child. It's the same person. And so so that's huge there as well, obviously, yeah.
It's beautiful. Just as she was suffering at the foot of the cross and trying to be there for her son, and then comforting John as well and being comforted by John, so now she stands in our times trying to comfort us with our crosses. So it comes full circle in a way.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And by the way, if anybody wants to see more about this, you just have to go to YouTube now. There's some amazing, you've probably seen some of them too, some amazing science in the YouTube videos on Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Oh, absolutely. They've done a good job. And of course, along with that, I would encourage people to read the text it's called the Nican Mapua, and that's the document written not long after Juan Diego died, where he had spoken to one of his friends, Antonio Valeriano, who wrote the Nican Mapua, which recounts the exchange between Our Lady and Juan Diego, and that's where we get that exchange between them, that dialogue.
Yeah. Well, you better start spelling, Father. Start spelling.
Yeah, sorry. So it's Nican, Nican, and then Mapua is Mopohua.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you for that intro. With all of that,
Sure.
When I was talking to a mutual friend, Chris, he was saying that you too have had an experience or two. You want to go down that road?
Sure, that'd be fine. I think what stands out for me, at least earlier on in my formation, before I became a priest, it would be I had a near-death experience where I'm pretty convinced my guardian angel saved my life. This is when I was studying in South America. Before the semester started down in Chile, a group of students and I made a visit to a town on the beach of the Pacific coast called Constitucion. And at one point, we were walking down the beach. I broke away from the group. I wanted some time to myself. Now, growing up in Minnesota, I had always liked swimming in the water, and I loved waves. But in Minnesota, you don't have an opportunity to be tossed around by big waves. Well, here was my chance. It's Pacific Ocean, but there was, and the waves were getting pretty tall. And there was a sign, though, on the beach that said, no swimming after 6 p.m. because of tides. And I looked at my watch. It was 6 on the nose. And I thought about it for a second. I was about to turn 21 at the time. I was a strong swimmer. I thought, I'll be fine. So I decided to go in, and almost immediately I got pulled out to sea by a riptide, a strong one. And I didn't know that to deal with riptides, you need to swim to the side. You let yourself get drawn out, you swim to the side, and then you make your way back to shore. Well, I fought it head on, and it's like I was on a fast water treadmill fighting this thing. So I tired myself right out. Then I got dragged out to sea. And so I was probably a good 300 feet out. So before I could start to make my way back, and I was coming back in on a slant though, because that was just the direction of the waters. So I wasn't coming straight in. I was getting dragged along the coast. And the direction I was getting dragged in, it was a nightmare, because there was a large group of jagged rocks coming out of the surf. So I'm in that direction, drifting, and now the waves are pounding me, and I'm very weak, and so I'm just struggling to stay afloat. So I was almost upon the rocks, and at this point I was still a good 50 feet out into the ocean, where I started to go under. And I remember praying to God, please save my life. I don't want to die here. I'll do anything. Please save me. You know, it was something to that effect, desperate. And I don't remember whether I cried out saying it or whether I prayed in my head. But I remember saying that prayer, and then I went under, and everything went black. Next thing I know, I woke up on the beach, except I was back in the other direction towards where the sign had been, because I had drifted down at least 100 feet. So I was back in the other direction, woke up on the beach, and I come to, and I have no marks on me from injuries from rocks. There are no footprints around me. There's nobody. I just wake up there. Physics-wise, impossible that I would end up back in that spot on my own, because I was back up the other direction of the coast where I woke up. And I could clearly see that when I got up. And I was scared and breathing hard and panicky, and I ran the heck out of there. But I because I had said that prayer, the only conclusion I draw from that was that one or more angels had, literally saved my life. Because I don't know what else it could have been. I mean, that's the best I can explain it. So I think my life was spared there. I really should have died in the ocean there.
Wow. Yes. Miracles get our attention, and they deliver a message. What's the message there? You're not done yet, John. You're going to become Father John and whatever else, right? And in the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, so many messages were delivered 500 years ago, so many, and continue to be delivered in these huge apparitions. Second to Guadalupe, and first in many eyes, is Our Lady of Fatima. Just last week, Marie was talking about Our Lady of Fatima because she didn't know who that was. She had a near-death experience and all this, but part of her experiences was this woman who called herself Our Lady of Fatima. She had to ask her mom, and then she did her own research to find out who this was. Huge event in history. So many messages were delivered by God in heaven through Mary to those three children and then to the world. Let's look back a little bit here at all that was delivered, especially on one day, October 13th. After promising a huge miracle on that day, it was delivered to tens of thousands. October 13th, 1917, Fatima, Portugal. It's raining. It's been raining all day, and it's cold. But still, they come by the thousands. People coming by train, cart, car, walking, 70,000 plus in Fatima, Portugal, and they're all headed to one spot, a hill where these children, Lucia, age 10, Francisco is 9, Jacinta is 7 years old, and they've been seeing things for the last 6 months. A woman who says she's from heaven, hasn't identified herself, not yet. She says she will today, and they waited, and they waited. And then the rain finally stopped, and the clouds parted, and you could see the sun.
It stopped raining.
And Mary did come, in blue and white, identifying herself for the first time as Our Lady of the Rosary.
What do you want from me?
Of all the things said to us that day, what impressed me most deeply was her tender sorrow. She said that we must turn to God, for He is already so much offended. She spoke so gently, but with so much pain. I wanted to spread her words throughout the whole world.
6 months before, at her very first appearance, when she identified herself only that she was from heaven, they asked, "Are we going to heaven? Can we go to heaven with you? We want to go to heaven."
Will she take us to see heaven? I want so much to see heaven.
She told me that she would take Francisco and Jacinta to heaven very soon. But I would have to stay.
Am I to stay here alone?
She told me not to be afraid, for she would be with me always.
And indeed, Jacinta and Francisco were in heaven within 2 years, within just 2 years, because of illness. Jacinta was exhumed in 1951 and found to be incorrupt, looked just like the day she was buried in 1920. Lucia lived to 97 as a nun.
Holy Queen of the Rosary, you promised a miracle. Will you show them a sign so that people will believe?
And she did. Light came out of her hands. She directed that light upwards to the sun. And then Lucia pointed at the sun and said, look at the sun. The sun began to spin, change colors, shoot streams of light out in all directions. And many said they could see the sun tremble. People got down on their knees, began to pray, their hands upstretched to the heavens. You could hear the creed. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. And then they looked up and they began to watch as the sun danced. Was this mass hysteria? Is this everybody just in mass hysteria? No, because that can't explain how people 20, 30 miles away were seeing the very same thing. A gentleman on a boat, miles and miles away from this, looking up and seeing the same thing and writing home about it. More documentation. As the sun danced about the sky. Newspapers were there, including atheist newspapers, and they reported accurately what was going on. They just said God had nothing to do with it. And they all watched as the sun danced, putting on a show for a good 10 to 12 minutes. One newspaper account mentioned a man who looked around to all the people and he started shouting at the men, "Take off your hats. Take off your hats. God is here." And then everyone thought the same thing at the same time. The world is coming to an end as the sun began to plummet towards the earth. And then the sun went back up and into place. Can you imagine being there? And then they looked around, and the ground was all dry, and their clothes were clean and dry. And they realized they had just stared at the sun for 10, 12 minutes with absolutely no harm. October 13th, 1917, Fatima, Portugal. So and you would think everyone would go, "Oh, okay, now what had been set up to now?" Because that seemed to be a message from God. Well, Mary had said in July, there will be a miracle on October 13th. Was there? Yeah. That Jacinta and Francisco would be in heaven soon. Were they? Yeah, within 2 years. What else? This war, World War I, will be over soon. Was it? Yeah. But there will be a bigger war unless people stop offending God. turning away from their sins and towards God. And he gave him 20 years. You know, God is, he is merciful. He is rich in mercy. He is slow to anger, but it's like, give you 20 years. But what gives you comfort in the story of Mary and Fatima is that she said, in the end, my immaculate heart will triumph. Her immaculate heart. Lucia was also told by Mary that one of the reasons why Lucia was to remain on earth was to help her son, because Jesus wanted her to help develop a devotion to Mary's immaculate heart. And that immaculate heart should be right there with Jesus' sacred heart. If you have a miraculous medal, you'll see on the back, there's the immaculate heart of Mary and the sacred heart of Jesus side by side. And that's the way Jesus wanted it to be, together, their hearts together. Okay. So there needed to be this new devotion to the immaculate heart of Mary. In fact, in 1930, Jesus appeared to Lucia, and the subject of Mary's Immaculate Heart came up, and he says there needs to be this devotion to Mary's Immaculate Heart because in reparation for all the sins against Mary. What sins against Mary? Jesus was not happy. He was not happy with the blasphemies against his mother. What blasphemies? He says there were 5. People were doing 5 things, if you will. The blasphemies against her Immaculate Conception, the blaspheme against her being the mother of God and the mother of all of us, our heavenly mom, the blasphemes against her perpetual virginity, the blasphemes that keep children away from Mary, and how some scorn the sacred images of his mother. He was not a happy guy. So this devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary was in reparation for the sins against his mother. So, which takes us back again to Fatima when Mary said, Russia needs to be consecrated to my Immaculate Heart. And the children are looking at her like, Russia? They didn't know it was a country. They thought it was a girl. Who's Russia, right? But it was because Mary said Russia was going to be spreading its errors and causing a lot of trouble in the world and a lot of persecution to the church. And that is why she brought up Russia. She was saying this between May and October of 1917. You know what happened also on October 13th, 1917? On October 13th, Vladimir Lenin was coming into Moscow to put the plan into action for a revolution for communism to take over. Also, on that very same day, revolutionaries were going into a cathedral, Kazan Cathedral, huge cathedral, and they were sacking it. They were destroying as much as they could. Atheism, communism, game on, game on. And a month later, Russia would be a communist nation after the revolution. Again, the prophecy of Mary. This was going to be such a sign. What Jesus wanted everyone to see is that if people did what Mary was saying to do, you would see Russia converted like that. It would just happen like that. That it would be such a sign about her Immaculate Heart to go right along with his Sacred Heart. This would be such a sign. But did people follow? You know. So in 1929, when Mary appeared to Lucia and said, okay, it's time for the Pope and all the bishops to gather, some kind of ceremony, and consecrate Russia. Give me Russia, basically, and I'll get rid of this communism thing. And the church didn't do it. A head shaker. I mean, the Pope had a ceremony, had a mass, but he didn't bring all the bishops in. Not in the 40s, not in the 50s. And so we had to go all the way to the 1980s before John Paul II, after being shot on May 13th of 1981, and that bullet somehow went around an artery, that he had a special devotion then to Our Lady of Fatima, and he wanted to see if he could do something about consecrating Russia, now the Soviet Union, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary to get rid of communism, right? And convert this nation back to Christianity. It was the idea. So that kind of takes us up to this point where I gave a talk recently, and I kind of got into this James Bond story. It's not a James Bond story, but I just never heard it before. So we're going to go to the talk and talk about how this undercover work was being done to get rid of communism and to finally, once and for all, maybe consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Pope John Paul II, he wants to do this. He puts together 15 paragraphs of text to consecrate the world, including Russia, Soviet Union,
to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. He's sending it out to all the bishops in the world so that everybody on the Annunciation anniversary, March 25th, 1984, everybody everywhere, a bishop is reading this text and offering Russia, the world, including Russia, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. But here's the part of the story I don't think you've heard before. This was stunning to me. Mother Teresa of Calcutta also had this thing about this consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart. She wanted to be in on this, and they have a mutual friend, a bishop by the name of Pavol Hinalika. Here's what she says to the bishop. She says, you are going to celebrate Mass secretly inside the Kremlin. Yeah, the heart of the Soviet Union. You're going to be inside the Kremlin. There are cathedrals in there, and you're going to celebrate Mass. And he's going, how long do you want me to be in the Gulag? He goes over to the Kremlin. He's just a tourist. There are 3 cathedrals inside that are now museums. So he comes inside, and there's a guard there. And the guard says, okay, you can go, but the bag stays here. He's got everything in there. He's got everything in there. So he starts doing the small talk. And how's your family? And blah, blah. He kind of talks to him for a while. And he says, I really need my bag. I got some personal items in there. Okay, exception. Go ahead. So when he goes in with his bag, he goes to the first church, Michael the Archangel Cathedral. He goes up to the altar. Like I say, it's a museum. You got tourists all around, right? He goes up to the altar. He pulls out Pravda, the newspaper. Pravda, by the way, means truth. And inside, tucked inside, he's got the text. And he reads it slowly. He prays it slowly. Consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Puts it back in. Goes over to another church. He goes over to Church of the Annunciation. Goes up to the altar. Tourists around, right? Again, pulls it out. Does it again. He looks around. If there was Mass being celebrated in there, the chair where the patriarch, where the Russian patriarch, their bishop, if you will, where he would sit, he goes over to that chair and he puts a miraculous medal at the chair. Then he kind of goes around like a tourist. He's taking pictures, just doing touristy things, and then sits down and begins to quietly, quickly celebrate Mass. He's got a little aspirin bottle with some wine in it. He's got a nylon bag with host in it, and he celebrates Mass. Very short homily that day. He's sweating bullets. And he celebrates the Mass. Then he's not done yet. He leaves. He walks across the square. Lenin's tomb. He stands in front of Lenin's tomb. There's a guard this close to him. And he pulls out Pravda. He reads it there too. He shoots across the plaza again. He looks up on a building. There's a sign that says, communism will triumph. You know what went through my mind? Fatima, when Mary said, after all is said and done, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. That's what went through my mind. He gets on a plane, comes back home. Did it work? Did it work? Did it work? John Paul II contacts Lucia. Here's what we did. Did it work? She says, I'll pray. I'll find out. We understand that she sent back a note saying, Mary says yes. Done. She will be faithful. Just watch. This is 1984. And then in 1991, on Christmas Day, 1991, for the last time, the sickle and hammer flag of the Soviet Union came down. Wow. How's that for Mary?
Would you call that a complete conversion of Russia? No. A heck of a good start, though. After all that time, after all those decades, finally things began happening quickly. But as far as it being this 100% Christian nation now, no, you can't say that. But like I say, it's a partial. The takeaway in today's episode, I would say, is a quote from Mary from the Bible. And that is, do whatever he tells you. That's it. Do whatever he tells you.
She is the messenger of our times, really kind of a prophet of these times, constantly calling us back to God and working miracles like this to get our attention, but to pay attention to a message. One thing I say in my talks on Marian apparitions, I said, we can never forget that the purpose of the miracle, God is trying to flag our attention to listen to something that he wants to tell us.
And happy birthday, Mom. Thank you for everything you've done for all of us and all of these proofs out there of a God, of an existence of God who's given us all of this and all of these blessings, including you, and how Jesus keeps bringing us to him. through you. Thank you for that. All right. It seems a silly question. I'm going to end with where we began. It seems such a silly question now, actually. But we'll leave it here. And I'll see you next week at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack. And the question again?
Do you believe in God?
I believe in myself.
What does that mean?
I have confidence in myself.
I have no interest in myself. I start thinking about myself, I get bored out of my mind.